It's impossible to go anywhere this time of year and not see signs of the upcoming election. But when voters go to the polls, there will be much more than candidates at stake. This November, an issue will go up for referendum that affects millions of Floridians. Amendment 2, also known as the Florida Marriage Protection Amendment, is a divisive issue that seeks 60% of the population's approval. It reads, "Inasmuch as marriage is the legal union of only one man and one woman, as husband and wife, no other legal union that is treated as marriage or the substantial equivalent thereof shall be valid or recognized." We'll hear from two people, two sides of the issue.
First of all, it's not exactly clear. One of the issues with the amendment is that it's a little ambiguous in the wording, but the way it's worded, it will effectively have the state de-recognize any kind of union that's not an official marriage between a man and a woman. Okay. So therefore, any same-sex partnerships would be officially de-recognized, but the way it's worded, it can also officially de-recognize opposite-sex domestic partnerships as well.
Supporter and YesToMarriage.org volunteer Michael McVety explains the law a little differently.
Well, Amendment 2 basically is putting what we currently have in our books, in our Florida statutes, and putting it into our Constitution, okay? It's interesting that people are making a huge deal about this, like as if there was no law that was talking about, for instance, same-sex marriage, and all of a sudden putting language together in the Constitution. That's not the case.
And he's right. It's already outlawed in 4 places within the Florida statutes. So why is it so important to put into the Constitution?
Certainly, I think another reason to have this in there is to affect turnout in the presidential and congressional elections, and there's some evidence to show that in 2004, similar kinds of amendments brought out a lot more fundamentalist religious views, people who would then end up voting for Republicans or even some Democrats who might support their views on all sorts of policy issues.
The 2004 election was close, very close. President Bush won by about 3 million votes. Some argue that without issues like this on the ballot or in the political discussion, the Republican base may not have come out as strongly, and Senator John Kerry would have been elected. This brings us to another interesting question. Why is it so important for the government to decide if two people, gay or straight, should be able to get married when they're in love?
Every stable society, civilization, whatever term you would like to use, frame of reference, is based on one man and one woman creating a family, typically, and building society from there. And as you remove, say, for instance, a husband or a wife, that can obviously damage a unit. It's not, for instance, to say that divorce doesn't happen or that one of the spouses, for instance, dies naturally. That life does occur. Oh, the entire issue is taking the same law, putting it into the Constitution, saying yes, through 6,000 years of history that we've basically had, or whatever society you want to look at, it's always been between a man and a woman.
Many also believe that a broad gay marriage ban is relevant because it's important to religious Americans. But should we legislate based upon religious values?
A lot of people are arguing increasingly that doesn't mean that there's supposed to be no type of religious value in our Constitution. Clearly it is. And so what people are saying that we're a secular society, I wouldn't say that. As is pointed out, we have a Judeo-Christian system because the people that set up this country were Judeo-Christian.
Without a doubt, James Madison, who was the major force behind the Bill of Rights and as well as the first part of the Constitution, believed in a wall of separation between religion and government. Right now, a majority of the Supreme Court interprets the Establishment Clause. The U.S. Supreme Court interprets the Establishment Clause, which is the provision of the First Amendment that's relevant here, that it does constitute a wall of separation between religion and government.
Now, with regards to a secular person, well, let's take a look at this. Okay, why, for what reason would you vote against it, honestly? There's been all kinds of interesting, cases about how this is going to open a whirlwind of lawsuits and trying to figure out what our society is about. All it is taking what is written in the statutes and putting it into our Constitution.
Dr. Tauber disagrees, saying the vague wording will result in a large volume of litigation to interpret the law, costing taxpayers millions.
Any constitutional provision, federal or state constitution, is up to judges. One of the things I think people should be aware of is that The state will, if it so chooses, be forced to defend the strict wording of it, and as a result, the state would be engaged in a lot of very expensive litigation. And given the state's extreme budget shortfall, I think voters should be aware, and it doesn't mean they necessarily should vote against it, but they should be aware this will come at a cost to the state. And that cost will be litigation, and it's not going to be cheap. And right now, the state needs every cent it can get.
So we ask Mr. McVety why the wording is so vague and whether it should be more clearly defined.
The language thereof that you were talking about is saying, listen, just because we don't go around and say that everything else is less than legally a man and a woman, for instance, they're saying that because of some of the things that judges have decided based in California and Massachusetts, they're saying no, they're saying marriage is only one man and one woman. It does use that terminology. It's saying that, for instance, that it's talking against theoretically polygamy, and it's saying that yes, marriage is what is desired by that definition. Now, if you want to start calling other things, whether you want to call it common law marriages and that, it's saying that the term marriage is only one man and one woman. The marriage amendment is just talking about a man and a woman. It's not saying let's take away rights right now. The things that you're describing right now are already existing and there's nothing to do with a marriage amendment. So, for instance, if they want to change laws, whether it's affecting unmarried people, heterosexual, homosexual, whatever, that's another separate issue.
But according to the law, it may not be. As Dr. Tauber stated, the law has no clear definition, and so the definition will only be definitively settled in court. So to review, what are the important topics with Amendment 2? What will be the effect of Amendment 2? Well, nobody's quite sure. Proponents say it's aimed at banning gay marriage, but opponents say it's worded too vaguely, and determining whether or not it applies to straight couples will come at great cost to the citizens of Florida. In addition, whether or not they support gay marriage, many opponents say we should not write discrimination into our laws. Why is banning gay marriage relevant? Supporters point to history and say that it's vital that homosexuality is not part of a healthy society. Opponents argue that the traditional view fails to address new social and psychological research, and that passing a law like this only serves to further stratify our society. But, regardless of your position, both Mr. McVety and Dr. Tauber agree. People need to get out and vote.
Vote in an informed way. Don't just vote. Think about the issue. Read both sides. Read both. Listen to both supporters and opponents, and make the informed decision as a result.